period of time to recuperate from the attack. She also wanted to train a bit more and patiently wait to regain her strength before leaving. However, the money she had on her wasn't nearly enough. The storage ring she'd obtained from the cold-faced man had a magical barrier protecting it. Thus, after staying for only 3 days, she had already run out of money. She sat down by the roadside and looked at the passerby, wondering how she could earn money. Right at that moment, a luxurious carriage passed in front of her. There were more than 50 guards protecting the front and back of it. The procession was very long, and everyone on the street avoided the vehicle, in reverence and fear. The gossip from a woman who was buying vegetables beside her reached Myra's ears. "She's definitely worthy of being called a noble. This young lady of the Spear family has an imposing manner when she goes out." Of course, and I heard that not only is Miss Spear beautiful, but her cultivation talent is also exemplary. I wonder who will have the honor to marry her. Granny, you still don't know. Today, Miss Spear is going to the palace of the Rogers family to finalize her engagement. Wait, who will Miss Spears be engaged to? Of course, he's none other than the #1 genius of Hudson City, the 6th son of the Rogers family, Leon Rogers. Who else would be worthy of the Spear family's young heiress? As the lackey buying vegetables walked farther and farther away, the corner of Myra's mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer. The green tea wench with my unfaithful lover? Isn't this a match made in heaven? She thought, thinking back to the time when the Rogers family only wanted to cling to Myra and brought her back so they could impatiently coax Myra and Leon to announce their engagement. Carol Spears was extremely jealous. However, in terms of family status, her family standing was only equivalent to a viscount position, while the Watt family was the #1 Duke of the Great Hudson Empire. In terms of talent, Carol was left far behind by Myra, and in terms of appearance, Carol had fared even worse. Myra had been hatching a devouring beast without knowing it, all the while being treated as a disabled person who couldn't cultivate and nursing extremely low self-esteem as a result. For these reasons, the jealous Carol not only bullied Myra, but also bribed the servants of the Rogers family. Not only did Carol bully Myra publicly, but she always sent Myra rancid food every time. 4 years later, it was basically impossible for Myra to recover from this, and Carol had cruelly scratched Myra's face, creating a huge cross-shaped scar on one side. Due to the extremely corrosive poison that the blade had been dipped in, the wound festered badly, thus leaving an awful scar. Myra had been too frightened to report that Carol was responsible for her wound. The Rogers family didn't pursue the matter of treatment either. In the end, it caused the scar to twist and turn, making Myra look extremely sinister. From then on, Myra felt even more inferior to Carol. She was completely abandoned and fell into the darkest 4 years of her life. Leon, on the other hand, became increasingly handsome. Right now, Myra, who was 20 years old, already past the peak time for cultivation, and since there was no hope of recovery, she silently allowed her little sister to make her move. This level of scheming and shrewdness, this level of shameless, was simply unimaginable. Now, Leon wanted to marry someone else before their engagement even ended. Did Leon really think she was dead? Although she wanted to get as far away from these people as possible, how could she let them live peacefully? She angrily stood up, patted her bottom, and followed Carol's carriage. However, when she arrived at the Rogers castle, she didn't walk through the main entrance. Instead, Myra climbed over the wall and entered her private courtyard. All these years, the Rogers family had always shown goodwill to Myra, but they did want benefits in return. After weighing the pros and cons, they gave her many treasures, such as famous people's calligraphy and paintings. It was not hard to guess their plan. It was nothing more than using these precious items as collateral, and should Myra leave, she wouldn't be unable to take these treasures with her. The Rogers family would never suffer such a loss. However, they didn't consider the fact that this body may have already accepted another soul. In Myra's mental dictionary, a gentleman was very strictly defined. He's a hooligan. Don't believe me if you can't accept it. Myra hummed as she kept all of the treasures in her spatial ring. She was planning to exchange these things for spirit crystals so that the devouring beast could eat them and his cultivation could advance again. Hey, you're not dead. A surprised, panicked voice screamed at the door. Myra turned her head and saw a 60-year-old woman standing there. She was the granny who'd always taken care of her. Every day, Granny brought her food that even dogs wouldn't eat. Bullying and humiliating her were Granny's standard form of entertainment. Granny was also Carol's accomplice, and the scar on Myra's face was her contribution as well. As you wish, I'm still alive. Myra replied with a smile. Granny hadn't changed at all over time. She walked into Myra's room and asked, "Where is everything? Did you steal it?" "This book is mine. How can you say it's stolen?" "You're rude. Don't you dare talk back to me. Don't believe for a second that I won't beat you to death." Granny arrogantly threatened Myra. Upon hearing that, Myra was no longer acting like her usual meek self. She fell into a rage. "Of course, I do. If I provoke Granny, I won't live a good life," Myra replied. Granny nodded, but she quickly noticed Myra's expression and tone were completely different from before. "But if you provoke me, it will be fatal," added Myra, still smiling. Granny felt that this conversation was getting weirder and weirder. However, at this time, Myra had already grabbed her shoulders with both hands, pressing her down so hard that she had to bend over and raise her knees to support her stomach. Granny's old face instantly flushed red. She bent down, feeling so much pain that she felt nauseous. Myra pulled away her bun, grabbed her hair, and knocked her on the solid wooden table without saying a word. Bam, bam, bam. Myra's hands were merciless as she knocked Granny's head against the table, causing the teacups to fall and shatter. Granny began to struggle, and after a few hits, She was utterly stunned. Myra threw her down on the ground in disgust. Then, looking at Granny, whose head was covered in blood and eyes unfocused, she smiled brilliantly. I have finally angered you now. How are you going to take revenge on me? Her smile was brilliant, but the scars on her face were too ferocious. Her smile was terrifying. Granny looked at her, scared witless. You're not Myra. You're a ghost. It's a ghost. You're right. I'm a ghost, and I'm here to take your lives. Myra whispered wickedly next to her ear. Ah! Granny screamed in shock and quickly ran out of the room as if to escape hell itself. Hey, I lied to you. Myra smiled as she looked back. How could Granny still hear her? I'm much more ruthless than a ghost, Myra said as she slowly walked out of the room. Granny ran to the front hall, and at that moment, she found it was full of guests. She shouted at the top of her lungs. Oh no! Myra is back! She turned into a ghost and come to take my life! Red silk festooned the hall, where a table of guests sat. In the middle sat the elders of the Rogers and Spears families, and at the end were Leon and Carol holding hands. Both had blissful smiles radiating from their faces. Hearing Granny shout, both of their expressions changed. Meryl walked over and berated Granny. Why are you shouting so much? We're celebrating today. Now hurry and get off the stage, you senile thing. Granny knew this woman had always been ruthless, and after being shocked by her, she no longer dared to make a sound. Suddenly, there came a faint, captivating voice. Meryl is right. Today is the day of a great celebration. Talking about ghosts is unlucky. Despite its melodiousness, when the people from the Rogers family heard this voice, they visibly stiffened. Looking over, they saw someone slowly walking toward the table. On her face was a mysterious smile. Myra, you're not dead, said Meryl, whose eyes widened in surprise. She had ordered and paid so many people to take care of this little issue. Their number should have been enough to kill a demigod, let alone a disabled person. How could she still be alive? Indeed, a few days ago I was plotted against by evil people, but the King of Hell said that I was wronged and let me come back to take my revenge, she said matter-of-factly. Paired with her face, it made people's hair stand on end. Meryl started, but quickly regained her senses and gave a cold laugh. Stop pretending here. Who doesn't know what you're up to? My brother will never stoop so low and marry someone like you. If you know what's good for you, leave immediately. I thought you were a noble lady of the Watt family. Why don't you take a piss? Look at your current crippled, entirely ugly appearance. You have the audacity to assume you can marry my brother? Even the beggars on the street hate you. Wishful thinking, Toad. The Rogers sisters all stood up and mocked her. Each of them exclaimed with more vigor than the last, treating this sarcastic ridicule as high entertainment. Myra wasn't angry. She walked into the hall and laughed in front of everyone. At that time, I was also the witness to these people. Since the marriage contract hasn't been canceled, Leon's fiancé can only be me. Initially, the Rogers family was afraid that Myra would deny it when she recovered her talent. Therefore, not only did they invite people to bear witness to it, but they even wrote down the marriage contract. The most important thing in the Hudson family was the spirit of the contract. So unless both agreed to cancel the engagement or one of them died, the marriage would remain permanent. The method they'd used to protect themselves had now become a slap to the face of the Rogers family. Leon's face was ashen and filled with hatred. The two families' parents were so angry that their bodies trembled. The Rogers sisters were at a loss for words, red in the face and bent on utter destruction. Meryl was furious and could only stomp her feet in anger as she scolded them. Shameless! Meryl is the smartest, said Myra, turning her head toward Leon and Carol. You're absolutely shameless. Meryl was stunned, and just as she was about to retort, Eva glared at her fiercely, scolding her for causing trouble. Meryl glared at Myra. Since when was this woman no longer weak and cowardly? It was infuriating to think she had such a glib tongue. Myra, said Leon with a frown. No matter how much of a scene you make today, I won't marry you. The person I love is Carol, and I will marry her. He knew that Myra always listened to him, and he made this declaration with great confidence. Why didn't you say so earlier? If you want, I can help you. Myra replied sensibly. Leon almost believed her, too. Really? Carol looked at her suspiciously, not understanding what had happened to her. Of course it's true. If you want to marry her without my consent, then it's not fair. Why don't I help you with your personal dilemma? Myra turned to Carol and said, How about this? I agree that you can marry into the family. Start as a mistress and serve me properly. When the time comes, assuming that I'm happy, I might allow you to be his wife. Myra! Carol clenched her fist tightly and gritted her teeth. Since she was young, no one had ever dared to show her any form of disrespect. She had never been humiliated like this, let alone by Myra, a person with a disability whom she once stepped on. If it weren't for so many people being present, she would have definitely killed her in one move. Myra, if you dare to disrespect Carol, I'll divorce you today, said Leon, looking at his beautiful woman. He felt his heart ache as his anger rose to new heights. You haven't even married me yet, so how can you divorce me? Myra quipped without a hint of anger. Instead, she was laughing, and the glimmer in her eyes was full of provocation. Leon sneered. Today, I'll write a letter to cancel the engagement, and that will be that. That will fine? Myra nonchalantly replied. Leon's face was filled with joy, and the gaze with which he looked at Carol was filled with adoration. Carol held his hand tightly, thinking of the blissful times to come. Her heart was about to leap for joy. But I disagree, Myra said indifferently. Her angelic voice was like ice-cold water, waking them from their reverie. Leon and Carol's smiling faces froze, and they stared angrily at Myra. What do you want? Leon felt he was about to go insane on account of this wretched woman. He would have liked nothing more than to strangle Myra to death right now. In this manner, the marriage contract would have surely been terminated. Meanwhile, Meryl felt even more hatred in her heart. Why hadn't she sent more warriors to kill her? What do your strange questions have to do with me? Myra said with a frown. Right now, the one who's betrayed my trust and done wrong is you. Why are you blaming me instead of owning up to your mistakes? Carol glared at her, overcome by bitter resentment. All of the heads of the various families are here. You can give your comments. What crime is it for Leon to ignore the spirit of the contract? Myra said to the heads of the families who were seated. These highly respected leaders thought that Myra was overestimating herself, but they couldn't say so outright. Thus, they all expressed that Myra's statement was reasonable, and Leon should, indeed, apologize and marry Myra. Leon and Carol's faces instantly turned ashen with dismay. I told you, don't glare at me. Be careful, or I might not allow you to be his mistress at all. Myra mockingly said while looking at Carol with a triumphant smile. Myra, I'll kill you! Screamed Carol, flying into a rage and fiercely struggling to free herself from Leon. With a tap of her feet, her finger turned into a claw, aiming straight for Myra's heart. If he let her hit Myra hard enough, with her strength as a level 6 warrior, Myra's heart would have been pulled right from her chest. Myra never thought she could make a move suddenly, but her reaction was swift. When no one expected Carol to attack a disabled person with a sneak attack, she had already moved, avoiding the fatal move. Carol didn't expect her to be able to dodge it. In a second, she was already running away from her. Myra immediately provoked her after realizing that she still had intentions to attack her. A so-called aristocratic young lady wants to take a person's life if she disagrees. Aren't you afraid you won't be married off since you're so ruthless and wholly devoid of dignity? Her words were reasonable. Even if she didn't marry Leon, All the most powerful people in the city who deserved to be her family were here. Based on today's event, who would dare to marry her? Carol could see that after Myra finished speaking, the elders from some large families had already revealed displeasure on their faces. But right now, she didn't care about anything else. She only wanted to kill Myra and make her shut her hateful mouth forevermore. At this critical moment, Leon walked forward and pulled her back. Carol, don't be like this. Carol's chest was moving up and down intensely. She glared at Myra with bloodshot eyes like a mad beast. If Leon hadn't pulled Carol away, she would have pounced on Myra and torn her to pieces. Myra took 2 steps forward and whistled. Whoa, just imagine. You're the one who's angry when you're the one who stole my fiancé. I wonder if you still think I'm bullying you. Leon pulled tighter as he furiously said, Myra, you just want to marry me, right? I can promise you that you'll regret marrying me. Seeing his fierce gaze, the surrounding parties felt that this would be worth the girl's consideration. If Myra married into the family, there was a great possibility that she would be mistreated and abused in some form by Leon. After speaking, Leon turned to Carol and said, Don't worry, Carol. Even if I marry her, I'll always love you. This man was absolutely shameless to publicly declare that he wanted to abuse his wife. When Carol heard this, her heart ached a little less. She looked at Myra and said, Did you hear that? Leon doesn't love you at all. Myra pouted her lips when she heard this. Is that really what you think? If I were to marry him, would you, a dignified, noble lady, want to be his mistress? Myra inquired with raised eyebrows. Carol's eyes flared with anger again. To marry Leon was something she had always considered. But now that Carol had to be a mistress, she was extremely unwilling. But if she gave up, she would never be able to find a genius like Leon who was willing to marry her again. How about this? I'll give you a chance. If you agree to one condition, I can give this trash to you. Myra saw the fire was over and dangled the bait she had prepared. When Leon heard Myra calmly state that she would release Leon, his eyebrows knitted in confusion. Didn't this woman really love him or what? Carol's eyes lit up. What condition would that be? Myra extended a snow-white finger and replied, 1 gold coin. You only want 1 gold coin? Carol asked in disbelief. I want to have more, but that's all he's worth. Myra said, seeming to perform a mental calculation to confirm as much. Unlike the pork in the market, he's neither edible nor pleasing to the eye. I'd say that 1 coin is more than fair. Laughter came out from the hall. It seemed that Leon wasn't worth a lot in Myra's eyes, not even worth a piece of pork. Even now, No one could tell that she had been playing around for so long because she couldn't bear to break up with Leon and was making fun of the cheating couple. Leon's face changed. He became even uglier, looking prepared to blow smoke from his nostrils. "Myra, are you messing with me?" Myra had always been a magnanimous person. Hence, she nodded earnestly and replied, "Absolutely. Simply look at your appearance. You don't have a desirable figure. In addition, your character is so unappealing. Aside from people who are blind, who would like you? Personally, I just want to throw up thinking about it." Leon's face flushed red, and for a change, he was at an utter loss for words. He was immensely talented and had been praised to great heights since he was young. He'd never, in all of his years, been humiliated in such a manner, not to mention in front of a respectable crowd. If word were to spread, how would he ever be able to hold his head up in the city? "Hey, blind one, if you want this man, then just give me the money. Don't hesitate and bargain. I'll only give you this one chance. Otherwise, I will be the legal wife even if I don't marry him," Myra said as she extended her hand toward Carol. As long as the gold coin was placed in her hands, Leon Rogers would never be able to raise his head with pride again. Carol wanted to think about it more, but after hesitating for a moment, Myra had already retracted her hand. Without thinking, Carol took out a gold coin and thrust it toward Myra. Accepting the coin, Myra smiled. Leon held onto his chest and snarled, "Myra, you've gone too far." "Is this called bullying?" Myra's face turned cold. She stared at him and said, "Have you forgotten how you bullied me all these years?" Leon was silent for a moment, then suddenly started to reminisce about the days when Myra had chased after him every day. It felt so very long ago. "Myra, you insulted my family. I want to challenge you to defend my family's honor," said Meryl, stepping forward in anger. Hudson was highly established when it came to martial arts. Any disputes could be resolved by duel as long as both sides agreed. Then they would be safe and sound after going to the dueling platform. Myra glanced at her and said with disdain, "How can you have the gall to challenge me, a person who can't cultivate?" "You're too sharp with your words. Don't you dare to duel with me." Meryl was still considered intelligent. She finally understood that with Myra's current abilities, it would be impossible for her to win a war of words. But in the realm of force, she could only claim victory. Wrong. Myra raised her brows and looked at her. "I accept." The hall was filled with gasps and hisses. They didn't understand why Myra, who seemed extremely intelligent, would suddenly act so stupidly. She was the body of a genius with crippled spiritual roots. Everyone knew that fighting a level 6 warrior like Meryl was simply suicidal. "The Rogers are really hell-bent on humiliating yourselves. How can I not help you?" said Myra. At this moment, 2 people were standing on a nearby roof. One of them said, "My lord, do you want me to make a move?" The person being questioned didn't say a word. His deep gaze remained fixed on Myra's face, quietly watching